Hi again. This is a brief tutorial just introducing you to some ways to navigate your way around in the Oxford English Dictionary once you're there. I put in the word inclement here and I'm going to click go and we're going to get the definition of that word. Pretty straightforward. And one of the things that you can do when you have an OED definition before you is you can find out its etymology. That is, where did the word come from? Very helpfully, we're told it comes from the Latin, inclementum. Using in, prefix in the third sense, there's a little 3 there, plus clement, the adjective. So inclement means not clement. Well, let's check that out. We have our prefix, the third sense of in, and we're told that it is a prefix used to express negation or privation. So that makes sense. In meaning the negation of clement, not clement. But what does clement mean? We'll look that word up. You find out that the Latin word clement means mild, placid, or gentle. And it can be used of persons or their actions, mild and humane, merciful, lenient, or clement can be used of weather, climate, mild and gentle, opposed to inclement, which is where we started. So sure enough, it makes sense, and it's easy to piece together from these pieces, without even looking at the definitions, what we might expect the word to mean. The opposite of clement, not clement, and here we have of climate or weather, not mild or temperate, extreme or severe for weather. Down here we have not merciful or kindly, pitiless, harsh, severe, or cruel. One describing weather, one describing persons. But there's more to it than that. We get a lot more with these definitions, and let me show you. Here we have a date, 1667. We have the name of an author, John Milton. We even have the name of a book, Paradise Lost. And we have this sentence phrase, to shun the inclement seasons, rain, ice, hail, and snow. That tells us is that the first recorded usage of this word inclement to describe climate or weather is by John Milton in his work Paradise Lost, dated to the year 1667. No one's found it in written English preceding that date. The second definition, not merciful or kindly, pitiless, harsh, severe, cruel, dates to 1621, even earlier, 46 years earlier, by an author named John Mole in his translation of Camerarius's Living Library. In his sentences, Pope Clement V was inclement and cruel. He's making a pun there. The Pope's name is Clement, but he was actually inclement. He was harsh, cruel, pitiless. Why is it that this second definition comes second, even though it was first used in 1621 and this was first used in 1667? This would be the older definition. Shouldn't it come first? Well, normally it would, but here's an important notation at the end of that definition. OBS, obsolete. That means that no one uses the word inclement to describe persons anymore. It's exclusively used now to describe climate or weather. So that's a little bit of the word history as well. It starts out in our language as a way to describe persons, and in a sense is used metaphorically then to describe the weather by personifying the weather, by suggesting that it lacks the sort of mildness and the pity that we associate with a nice person. The weather is like a cruel tyrant. It's inclement. And now that's the only sense that remains. So that's one way that you can trace a word history. The other thing that I wanted to point out to you about it, which is kind of interesting, is that in prefix that we looked at, which means the opposite. We see that in a lot of words. Incredible means not credible. Invulnerable means not vulnerable. So awfully often we'll see in as a prefix meaning the opposite of, or to negate the root word that comes after it. But what about a word like inflammable? It does not mean, it turns out, incapable of burning. it means capable of being inflamed or set on fire, susceptible of combustion, easily set on fire. Confer flammable, flammable, to set on fire. So how is it that a word flammable, when you put an in prefix in front of it, can mean not just the same thing, but even a more intense version of it? That's because if we look at the verb inflame and we look at the prefix in, it's not in prefix sense 3, it's in prefix sense 2. And there what we find is it has the senses into, in, within, on, upon, towards, or against. That is, the most common uses here are to intensify the word rather than to negate it. So sometimes in means the opposite, sometimes in means really a lot. I'll give you an example. I used the word intensify there. If something is tense, you know what that means. But if something is intense, that doesn't mean it's the opposite of tense. It means it's really tense. And that's the way that in works in inflammable. It's not just flammable, it's really flammable. It's inflammable. Easily set on fire. And so one of the ways that you kind of put words together is figuring out what these pieces mean. And quite often, although you might think you know what the piece means, it really rewards you to take a longer look and find out. That's one way that you can look around on the OED and find out word histories.